Bankrupt CEO saved injured man, unaware he was a vampire king who'd helped her regain everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's begin the story. It was a cold evening in New York City, and businesswoman Eleanor Graves was barely hanging on. She sat behind her desk in her once thriving office, staring at the pile of overdue bills in front of her. Just a year ago, she was at the helm of a rapidly growing tech company, her vision being realized as the world embraced her innovations. Now, the weight of bankruptcy was closing in, and the future she had built seemed like a distant memory. Eleanor had worked tirelessly, but now it seemed like no matter how hard she tried, nothing could stop the inevitable collapse. The phone rang, breaking her thoughts. She hesitated before answering, dreading the next conversation. "Ms. Graves, the bank is moving forward with the foreclosure," the voice on the other end said. Eleanor's stomach dropped. "Is there anything we can do?" she asked, but deep down, she knew there wasn't. Her company's debts were too high, and there were no investors left to bail her out. After the call, Eleanor slumped in her chair, staring out the window at the city lights. The once vibrant skyline now felt like a reminder of everything she had lost. She was about to close her eyes for a moment of peace when she heard a crash outside the building. Frowning, she stood up and walked to the window. To her surprise, she saw a man lying motionless in the alley below. Without thinking, she grabbed her coat and rushed out the door. The rain was falling heavily now, soaking through her clothes as she made her way to the alley. She knelt beside the man, his breathing shallow and labored. She could tell from the way he dressed that he wasn't just any ordinary man. His suit was tailored perfectly, and his shoes looked expensive, but there was something off about his appearance. His face was pale, almost ghostly, and his eyes were closed. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked, shaking him gently. He didn't respond, but as she touched his wrist, she could feel his pulse. Weak, but there. In a panic, she reached for her phone to call for help, but before she could dial, the man's eyes fluttered open. For a split second, their eyes met, and she could see the intensity of his gaze, like he could see straight through her. Then, with an almost imperceptible movement, he reached up and placed his hand on her arm. "Thank you," he whispered in a voice that sent a shiver down her spine. Confused but relieved, Eleanor helped him to his feet. "Do you need an ambulance?" she asked, but he shook his head. "I'll be fine. You should get inside. You're soaked." Before she could protest, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night like he had never been there at all. Eleanor stood there for a moment, the rain pouring down on her, wondering if the whole thing had been a dream. Little did she know, this chance encounter would change everything for her. The next day, Eleanor received a call from an unknown number. When she answered, the voice on the other end was smooth, deep, and surprisingly familiar. "Ms. Graves," the voice said, "I'm the man you helped last night. I believe you owe me a dinner." Her heart skipped a beat. She recognized the voice instantly. "Who is this?" she asked. "I am Vincent Blackwood," the voice replied, "and I think you'll find that I can help you get everything back." The next morning, Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The rain from the night before had stopped, but the encounter with the mysterious man lingered in her mind. She couldn't help but wonder who he was and why he had shown up in that alley. As the day dragged on, her thoughts kept drifting back to Vincent Blackwood, the man who had somehow changed everything with just a few words. When she arrived at her office, there was a letter waiting for her on her desk. The envelope was elegant, embossed with a golden crest she didn't recognize. She tore it open, finding a handwritten note inside. "Ms. Graves, dinner tonight, my place. 7 o'clock. We're something comfortable. I'll make sure. You're taken care of." The letter was signed with his name, Vincent Blackwood. Eleanor stared at the note for a moment, unsure of what to make of it. Who was he, really? And what did he mean by take care of her? Was it another business deal? Or was there something more to his invitation? As the clock ticked closer to 7, Eleanor couldn't ignore the pull of curiosity. She decided to go. She wasn't sure what she was expecting, but she knew she had to find out. At exactly 7 o'clock, she arrived at the address Vincent had given her. It was a mansion, set back from the road, with large stone gates and tall, wrought iron fences that seemed to stretch on forever. The driveway was lined with trees, their branches heavy with mist from the evening fog. Eleanor felt like she was walking into a different world, a world where she didn't belong. The front door swung open before she could even knock, revealing a tall man in a black suit, his eyes an unsettling shade of amber. He smiled warmly, though there was something almost predatory about it. "Ms. Graves," he said smoothly, "I'm glad you could make it." Eleanor swallowed hard, stepping inside. The foyer was grand, with marble floors and a chandelier that looked like something out of a fairy tale. She followed him through the house, feeling small and out of place in such an extravagant setting. They finally arrived at a large dining room, where a table had been set for two. "Please, have a seat," Vincent said, gesturing to the chair. Eleanor hesitated for a moment, then sat down. As Vincent poured them both a glass of wine, Eleanor couldn't help but ask, "Why did you invite me here? What is all this about?" Vincent's smile never faltered as he sat across from her. "I know things haven't been easy for you, Miss Graves. And I also know that you've been looking for a way out. A way to get everything back." Eleanor's heart raced. "How do you know that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know more than you think," he replied. "And I can help you regain everything you've lost. But it comes with a price." He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. "All I ask in return is your trust. I can offer you more than just financial help. I can offer you power, influence, the kind of life most people can only dream of." Eleanor stared at him, her mind racing. Could he really help her? And what did he mean by power? She felt both drawn to him and terrified at the same time. "What do you want from me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Vincent's eyes glinted in the dim light. "I want you to join me," he said. "You've already saved me once. Now it's time for me to return the favor. But there's something you need to know, Miss Graves. I'm not just a businessman. I'm not just a man with money. I am something far older, far more dangerous. And I can offer you a life you never thought possible." Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine as his words sank in. There was something about him, something that made her feel both captivated and terrified. She didn't know whether to trust him or run away as fast as she could. But deep down, she couldn't deny the allure of what he was offering. The chance to regain everything she had lost, and maybe even more. As the night wore on, Eleanor found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. She couldn't escape the pull of Vincent's presence. The way he spoke, the way he looked at her, it was as if he knew everything about her, every fear, every desire. She couldn't help but feel like she was teetering on the edge of something she didn't fully understand. And yet, she couldn't bring herself to leave. The dinner passed in a blur, the wine flowing freely as Vincent continued to weave his tale. By the end of the evening, Eleanor was exhausted, both mentally and emotionally. Vincent stood up, his gaze never leaving her. "I'm glad we had this time together, Miss Graves," he said, his voice low and smooth. "I think you'll find that the life I'm offering is worth more than anything you could ever imagine." Eleanor didn't know how to respond. She felt like she was standing at a crossroads, unsure of which path to take. But something in her gut told her that her life was about to change forever. And as Vincent led her to the door, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was already in too deep to turn back now. It's been a few days since Eleanor's dinner with Vincent Blackwood. Her mind couldn't shake the memory of that night. The mansion, the elegant setting, and the mysterious man who claimed he could give her everything she had lost. She had spent the last few days weighing her options, but deep down, she knew she was already drawn into something far beyond her understanding. Despite her reservations, she found herself back in the same place where it all began, Vincent's mansion. Tonight, Vincent had asked her to join him again for a more personal conversation, and she couldn't refuse. She needed answers. Walking through the grand halls of his home once again, Eleanor felt the weight of the house's ancient beauty, the towering walls filled with paintings and relics from a different time. The mansion was far more than a lavish home. It was a fortress. Everything in it felt deliberate, calculated, like it was built to last through the ages, just like its owner. Vincent was waiting for her in a large study at the far end of the house, his silhouette outlined by the soft light coming from the fireplace. He was sitting at a massive wooden desk, a collection of books and papers scattered in front of him. When he saw her enter, he smiled that calm, predatory smile. "Eleanor," he greeted her smoothly. I was wondering when you would come back. Eleanor hesitated before sitting down across from him. You said you had something important to discuss, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Vincent's smile deepened. Indeed. But before we begin, let me ask you, do you trust me? Eleanor's eyes locked onto his, the question heavy in the air. It was a question she hadn't yet fully considered. Could she trust him? Could she afford not to? I'm not sure, she admitted quietly. Vincent's expression remained unreadable, but there was something in his gaze, something that made Eleanor feel like he could see straight through her. I understand your hesitation. I am not a man to be taken lightly. And yet, I believe we are at the edge of something that could change everything for you. He leaned forward, his voice lowering. I know the struggle you've faced. The endless hours, the sleepless nights, trying to hold on to something that's slipping away. I can offer you a way out, but I need your full commitment. No more doubts, no more hesitation. Eleanor swallowed hard, feeling the pressure of his words. She had always been a woman who prided herself on her independence, on her ability to handle everything on her own. But Vincent had shown her a way to escape the looming financial ruin. He could give her a future she never thought possible. What's the cost? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vincent's eyes gleamed. The cost is simple, Eleanor, he said, his voice now laced with an undeniable power. I want you by my side, not just as a business partner, but as something more. Eleanor felt her heart skip a beat. More? She repeated, a sense of dread creeping up her spine. You see, I am not a simple businessman, as I've said before, Vincent continued, his tone almost hypnotic. I am a vampire, and I have lived for centuries. My influence extends far beyond the walls of this mansion. I need someone I can trust, someone with the strength to endure what is to come. And you, Eleanor, you have that strength. Eleanor recoiled slightly, the weight of his words hitting her like a wave. Vampire? It sounded absurd, impossible. But looking at him, she saw something in his eyes, something ancient and unyielding, that made her question everything she thought she knew. Why me? She asked, her voice trembling. Why would you choose me? Vincent's gaze softened for the briefest moment. Because you are not like the others, he said, his voice now tinged with something deeper, something that sent a chill down Eleanor's spine. You have the heart of a fighter, and you've already proven that you can save yourself. You did it when you helped me, and you've been doing it every day since. You just don't realize it yet. Eleanor's mind raced. Could it be true? Was she really in the presence of someone who had lived for centuries? Someone with the power to change her life forever? What happens if I accept? She asked, her voice barely audible. Vincent stood up from his desk and moved closer to her. His presence was overwhelming, and Eleanor felt a surge of emotions she couldn't name. If you accept, Eleanor, he said, your life will never be the same. But together, we can build something that will last forever. No more debt. No more fear. Only power. Eleanor's heart pounded in her chest. Everything inside her screamed to run, to walk away and forget this strange encounter ever happened. But there was another part of her, a part that was tired of being on the edge, a part that longed for the opportunity to regain everything she had lost. I'll do it, she said, her voice strong despite the fear that gripped her. Vincent smiled, his eyes flashing with something she couldn't quite understand. Welcome to a new world, Eleanor. I've made my decision. Eleanor felt a strange weight lift off her shoulders as she walked through the mansion's grand halls, each step bringing her closer to a world she could hardly comprehend. She had accepted Vincent's offer, but the reality of her choice was only starting to set in. As they moved deeper into the mansion's heart, Vincent led her to a large room with high ceilings, where the air was thick with the scent of ancient wood and something darker, something older. The room was dimly lit, only a few candles scattered about to offer any illumination. It was unlike any other place she had ever seen. At the center of the room was a large circular table, and as Vincent gestured for her to sit, Eleanor noticed several objects that seemed completely out of place for a modern mansion. Ancient scrolls, worn books, strange artifacts that didn't seem to belong in this world. Vincent sat across from her, his gaze unyielding. Now that you've agreed, there's much you need to know, he began, his voice calm but commanding. Your life will change, Eleanor. But it's not just about wealth or power. He paused, studying her face as if searching for any sign of hesitation. I'm offering you something far greater. Eleanor clenched her fists in her lap, the excitement and fear inside her fighting for control. What is it that you want from me? You've already given me so much: money, a future, all the things I thought were lost. Vincent's eyes softened, though his expression remained intense. It's not just about what I can give you, Eleanor. It's about what you can become. I see something in you, something that you've yet to discover in yourself. Eleanor felt a chill crawl down her spine, his words making her feel both seen and vulnerable. I've lived a long time, Eleanor, longer than you could possibly imagine. And in all those years, I've learned that power is not just about money. It's about control. Control over fate, control over time, and most importantly, control over what others can never have. He leaned in slightly, his amber eyes glowing with an intensity that made her heart race. You, Eleanor, have the potential to be more than just a businesswoman. You can rise to a position where you have the world at your feet. But to do so, you must embrace what you are becoming, what you will become with my help. Eleanor felt a weight pressed down on her chest. What was he asking? She had already been given so much, but now there was a part of her that didn't know if she could handle the depths he was talking about. And if I refuse? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Vincent's smile was almost sad as he sat back, his gaze never leaving hers. There is no turning back, Eleanor. Once you accept, there is no easy way out. You'll be bound to me, bound to the world I've created, and there will be no escape. Eleanor swallowed hard, feeling a surge of fear mixed with desire. Her life had already been turned upside down. She had no idea where this journey would take her, but deep down, she knew there was no turning back now. What do I have to do? She asked, her voice steady, though she felt anything but. Vincent's smile returned, a glint of something darker in his eyes. For now, you need to understand what I am offering. I want you to join me, Eleanor. Not just as my partner, but as someone who will stand beside me in a world that few ever see. A world where the rules are different, where immortality and power are within your grasp. He stood up, walking toward one of the shelves lined with old tomes and ancient artifacts. I will teach you, Eleanor. I will show you how to harness the power that lies dormant inside you. But first, you must make a choice. You can stay here, by my side, and learn everything I have to offer. Or you can leave and return to the world you know, with all its limitations. Eleanor stood, her mind racing. She had made a choice already, but now it felt like the real decision was before her. Was she truly ready for the power Vincent promised? Could she embrace this new world, knowing that everything she had known before would be gone? She walked toward him, feeling a sense of clarity settle over her. I'll stay, she said, her voice firm. I want to learn. I want to see what this world holds. Vincent's smile widened, and for the first time, Eleanor saw something truly human in his expression: pride. Then welcome, Eleanor. You have just taken the first step into a world that will change everything you thought you knew. Now let's begin. As he turned to the shelf, pulling down an old book that looked more like a relic than a text, Eleanor couldn't help but feel a shiver of anticipation run through her. This was just the beginning, and the world she was about to enter was one she couldn't possibly understand, but she was determined to find out. With Vincent at her side, she would learn the secrets of a world beyond anything she could have ever imagined. The days that followed Eleanor's decision were nothing short of a whirlwind. Vincent wasted no time introducing her to the world he had promised to show her, a world that seemed both terrifying and thrilling, as though she had stepped into a different era entirely. He kept his word, guiding her through the vast mansion's hidden corridors and rooms, each holding knowledge far older than anything she could have ever imagined. There were books bound in ancient leather, scrolls written in languages she could barely understand, and artifacts that had been untouched for centuries. Every day, Eleanor was pushed further into this world, her mind stretching to keep up with the magnitude of the information. It was overwhelming at first, but she couldn't deny the exhilaration that came with learning the secrets of the supernatural. Vincent taught her things no ordinary person could comprehend. He showed her how to harness the energy in the air, how to read the ancient texts that spoke of power and immortality. With each lesson, Eleanor could feel herself changing, her body becoming more attuned to the strange, mystical forces that surrounded her. Her senses were heightened. She could hear whispers in the distance, feel the pulse of life beneath her skin. But with this newfound power came a burden she had not expected. As much as Vincent had promised her a future of wealth, influence, and control, Eleanor found herself wrestling with her own humanity. Was she willing to let go of the person she had been to become something else? Vincent seemed to sense her internal struggle. One evening, after a particularly intense lesson, he pulled her aside into the quiet of his study. "You're afraid," he said softly, his voice calm but unwavering. Eleanor looked up at him, the flickering candlelight casting shadows across his sharp features. "I don't know what I'm becoming," she confessed. "This power, this knowledge, it feels too much. What if I lose myself in it?" Vincent studied her for a moment, his amber eyes unreadable. "You will never lose yourself, Eleanor," he said, his voice softening. "What you fear is the unknown. The power is not what defines you. What you choose to do with it, that is what matters." Eleanor's heart pounded in her chest as she processed his words. She had come so far, but could she truly embrace this new life, this new world that Vincent had shown her? Was she ready to step into the shadows and leave behind everything she had known? The next few days felt like a blur. Eleanor found herself torn between her old life, the woman who had fought for everything she had, and the new life Vincent was offering her, where she could rise above the mundane and claim her place among the powerful. She had thought that money, success, and influence would be enough to satisfy her, but now she realized it wasn't just those things that she craved. She had a deep, unshakable hunger for something more. She wanted power, yes, but more than that. She wanted to prove that she was worthy of it. But as Eleanor began to lean into this new role, she couldn't ignore the growing tension in the mansion. Vincent's plans, whatever they were, seemed to be reaching a tipping point. She had seen the looks exchanged between him and his loyal followers, whispers of something brewing beneath the surface. One evening, as she walked the long halls of the mansion, she overheard a conversation between Vincent and one of his advisors, a tall, dark-haired man named Lucian. "She is ready, but there is still one thing we must do before we can move forward," Lucian said, his voice low and filled with urgency. "We can't afford any more delays." Vincent's reply was calm, almost too calm. "She will come around. She always does. You worry too much, Lucian." Eleanor stood frozen in the hallway, her heart racing as she processed their words. "What does he mean?" she whispered to herself, a sense of dread creeping into her bones. She had come here for knowledge, for power, but was she being used in a way she hadn't anticipated? As the days passed, the tension grew thicker, and Eleanor found herself questioning Vincent's true intentions. He had promised her everything: wealth, power, immortality, but what was the price? She was no fool. There was always a cost, and she was beginning to realize that the cost might be more than she was willing to pay. One night, unable to sleep, Eleanor found herself wandering the halls of the mansion, the silence oppressive around her. As she passed Vincent's study, she noticed the door was slightly ajar. She hesitated, then pushed it open, her curiosity getting the better of her. Inside, she found Vincent standing at the window, staring out into the night. He didn't turn when she entered, but she could feel the weight of his gaze on her. "You've been keeping secrets from me," Eleanor said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and determination. Vincent turned slowly, his amber eyes flashing in the dim light. "Secrets?" he asked, his tone casual, but Eleanor could hear the edge beneath it. "You're not telling me everything," she pressed. "What is it you're planning? What do you need from me?" Vincent's expression softened, and for a moment, he looked almost human. "I never meant to keep anything from you, Eleanor," he said quietly. "But there are things in this world, things that go beyond our understanding. The power I have offered you is not just for wealth or influence. It's for something much greater, something that will reshape everything." Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vincent's gaze darkened, his smile now gone. "It means, Eleanor, that the world is changing, and you, whether you realize it or not, are the key to everything." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, and Eleanor felt her heart race. She had walked into this world seeking power, but now she wondered what kind of power she was truly asking for. The words Vincent spoke hung in the air, heavy and filled with an ominous promise. Eleanor stood frozen in place, her mind racing to process everything he had just said. The world is changing, and you, whether you realize it or not, are the key to everything. She had come here, to this strange mansion, for power and knowledge, but now the price felt more than she had bargained for. What kind of power was he truly offering her? What kind of world was she being pulled into? Vincent's expression was unreadable as he walked toward her, his footsteps soft but deliberate. "You don't understand yet, do you?" he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "What you've agreed to, Eleanor, it's not just about learning to harness power. It's about transforming everything you are. It's about becoming someone, or something, new." Eleanor felt her pulse quicken as she looked up at him, her heart racing with a mix of fear and curiosity. She had already made the choice to stay, to walk this dangerous path, but now she felt a deep unease. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she admitted, her voice shaking slightly. "I don't know what I'm becoming." Vincent's gaze softened for a brief moment, and he reached out, placing a hand on her shoulder. His touch was cool, but there was something comforting about it, as if he were offering reassurance in the midst of her turmoil. "You're not alone in this, Eleanor. I've walked this path for centuries. I've seen what the world can be when you embrace your true nature, and I will guide you through it. You have the strength in you already. All you need is the right guidance to unlock it." Eleanor hesitated, but then she nodded slowly. She had already given so much of herself to this world, and now there was no turning back. Vincent led her deeper into the mansion, down a long, dimly lit hallway. The atmosphere in the air grew heavier as they walked, as if the house itself was alive, breathing with an ancient, almost sentient energy. When they reached a large, ornate door at the end of the hall, Vincent turned to her, his expression serious. "This is where it begins, Eleanor," he said. "Inside, you will learn the truth. You will understand what it is you must do to fully embrace what I've offered you." He opened the door with a creak, revealing a large, circular chamber. At the center of the room stood an altar, surrounded by candles that flickered with an eerie, almost supernatural glow. On the walls, symbols and markings were etched into the stone, glowing faintly in the dim light. Eleanor stepped into the room, her breath catching in her throat. It felt like stepping into another world entirely, a world that was both beautiful and terrifying. Vincent followed her inside, his footsteps barely making a sound. He stood beside her, his presence both comforting and unsettling. "This is where the transition begins," he said softly. "You must trust me, Eleanor. This is the only way for you to truly unlock the power within you." Eleanor looked at him, fear and uncertainty swirling inside her. "What is it that I have to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vincent's eyes flashed with something dark and ancient, something she couldn't fully understand. "You must give yourself fully to it. To me. To this world. It requires total surrender, Eleanor. Only then will you truly see what you can become." Eleanor felt her heart pounding in her chest as she looked around the room, the weight of his words settling over her like a thick fog. Was she truly ready for this? Was she ready to give herself up, to become part of this world, to let go of everything she had known? She had come this far, but now, standing in the heart of this dark and powerful place, she wondered if she had made a mistake. Vincent seemed to sense her hesitation. He stepped closer, his voice low and hypnotic. "You've already chosen this path, Eleanor," he said, his gaze never leaving hers. "You came to me, seeking power, seeking something more than what you had. You are ready. You just don't know it yet." Eleanor took a deep breath, her mind spinning. She had wanted this. She had wanted the power, the chance to start over, to become something greater than she had ever been. But now that the moment was here, she wasn't sure if she was strong enough to follow through. She closed her eyes, trying to push the doubts aside. She had already made her choice. She had already crossed the line. "I'm ready," she said, her voice firm. Vincent's eyes softened, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Good," he whispered. "Now we begin." As Vincent stepped away, he began to chant in an ancient language, his voice rising and falling with a rhythm that seemed to vibrate through the room. The candles flickered violently, and the symbols on the walls began to glow brighter, casting eerie shadows on the floor. Eleanor felt a strange energy building inside her, an overwhelming sense of power rushing through her veins. She felt herself being drawn into it, her body vibrating with the force of it. But at the same time, she felt a strange pull, as if something deep inside her was fighting against it. It was the last vestiges of her old self, the part of her that had once been human, the part that was still terrified of what she was becoming. But Vincent's voice continued to guide her, his words wrapping around her like a safety net. "Trust me, Eleanor," he urged, his voice like a whisper in her ear. "This is who you are meant to be." And as the power surged within her, she finally let go. She surrendered to it, to Vincent, to everything she had chosen. The room seemed to explode with light, and for a brief moment, Eleanor was lost in it, lost in the sensation of becoming something new, something more powerful than she had ever imagined. When the light faded, she opened her eyes, and the world around her had changed. She could feel the power coursing through her, feel the strength of it building within her. She wasn't the same person she had been before. She had become something else, something beyond human. And with that realization came a flood of emotion. She had lost herself in this power, but in return, she had gained something far more valuable. She had become part of something far bigger than herself. And now, she was ready to face whatever came next. The transformation had begun, and Eleanor could feel it coursing through every fiber of her being. She stood in the center of the chamber, her senses heightened, every detail of her surroundings sharper than before. The flickering candlelight seemed to dance with a life of its own, casting shadows that stretched across the room. She could hear the soft whisper of the wind outside, the faint creaking of the mansion's ancient walls. The world around her felt different, almost unreal, as if she were no longer truly part of it. As the final traces of the transformation faded, Vincent stepped forward, his presence overwhelming, yet strangely comforting. He looked at her, his amber eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "You've done it," he said softly, a hint of pride in his voice. "You've embraced what you are." Eleanor's breath caught in her chest as she looked at him, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. "What have I become?" she whispered, the words barely escaping her lips. Vincent smiled, his expression softening. "You've become something far greater than you ever imagined, Eleanor. You've embraced your true potential, the power that has always been inside you. You're no longer just a businesswoman. You are a part of this world, a world that few ever get to experience. You're one of us now." Eleanor's mind raced as she processed his words. One of us. She had always dreamed of a life beyond the ordinary, but now that she was here, standing on the precipice of something so much bigger than herself, she wasn't sure what to think. The power she felt inside her was undeniable, but so was the weight of it. It wasn't just about wealth or influence anymore. It was about something much deeper, something darker. And as she looked into Vincent's eyes, she wondered if she was ready to accept it. "What now?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Vincent's gaze never wavered. "Now we move forward. You are no longer the woman who walked into this mansion days ago. You are someone new, someone with the power to shape your own destiny. And together, we will change this world." The weight of his words sank in, and Eleanor felt a surge of determination rise within her. She had made the decision to step into this world, to embrace this power. There was no going back. Vincent took her hand, his grip firm but gentle. "There are others who will test you," he continued, his voice low. "Others who will try to break you, to use your power for their own gain. But you have me, Eleanor. You have my protection, my guidance. And together, we will make sure you rise to the top." Eleanor nodded, her resolve strengthening with each word. She had come this far, and now she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The world she had known was slipping away, but in its place, a new world was opening up, one filled with power, danger, and endless possibilities. She had never felt more alive. Vincent led her out of the chamber, through the grand halls of the mansion. The mansion that had once seemed so foreign to her now felt like a home, a place where she belonged. The air was thick with anticipation as they moved through the corridors, their footsteps echoing in the silence. She had been trained, but she had yet to truly experience the power she had unlocked. "There is one more thing you need to understand," Vincent said as they approached a large set of double doors. "You may feel invincible now, but the world outside is not kind. There are those who will stop at nothing to bring you down. They will test your loyalty, your strength, and your resolve. But remember, Eleanor, you are not alone." He opened the doors, revealing a grand hall filled with people, strangers and allies alike, all of them vampires like Vincent. Their eyes followed Eleanor as she stepped inside, each of them sizing her up. She could feel their gazes on her, assessing her, judging her. But instead of shrinking back, Eleanor stood tall, her newfound power radiating from within. Vincent moved to the center of the room, his presence commanding the attention of everyone in the hall. "This is Eleanor," he announced, his voice strong and unwavering. "She is one of us now. Treat her as you would treat me." Eleanor's heart raced as she stood in the center of the room, surrounded by people who were just as powerful, just as ancient as Vincent. They all looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and admiration, and for the first time in her life, she felt as though she truly belonged. But as Vincent introduced her to the others, Eleanor couldn't help but notice a few wary glances exchanged between some of the more prominent figures in the room. She knew that in this world, loyalty was everything, and she had just stepped into the middle of a dangerous game. As the night wore on, Eleanor found herself drawn into conversations with the other vampires. Some were intrigued by her, others skeptical, but all of them seemed to recognize the power she now held. She was no longer just Eleanor Graves, the bankrupt CEO. She was Eleanor, the woman who had unlocked her true potential, the woman who stood beside Vincent Blackwood, one of the most powerful beings in this world. And as the night came to a close, Vincent led her back to his private chambers. "Tomorrow, we begin," he said, his voice low and full of promise. "You will see what you are truly capable of. And once you do, you will never look at the world the same way again." Eleanor nodded, her heart racing with anticipation. The road ahead was uncertain, but she was no longer afraid. She had made her choice, and now she was ready to face whatever came next. The world was hers for the taking, and she would stop at nothing to claim it. The next few days were a blur of new experiences for Eleanor. She had embraced her transformation and accepted the power that came with it, but now, she found herself in a new reality, a reality where everything had changed, and nothing was quite as it seemed. Vincent had begun to guide her in her new role, but he was also distant, as though something was on the horizon, something that would test her in ways she couldn't yet understand. She spent her days in the mansion, training with the other vampires, learning their ways, and understanding the intricacies of the world she had entered. Every night, Vincent would take her through the city, showing her the hidden places, the dark corners where power could be seized, and where betrayal often waited in the shadows. It was a constant game of strategy, a dance of manipulation and control. But for all the power she was gaining, Eleanor still couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled deep within her. There was a war brewing, something that even Vincent had not yet revealed to her, but she could feel it in the air. The tension in the mansion was palpable, the other vampires were on edge, and the whispers of a coming battle had reached her ears. She had tried to ask Vincent about it, but each time, he would brush her off with a reassuring smile, telling her she would learn in time. But Eleanor wasn't one to wait idly. One evening, after a long day of training, Eleanor found herself alone in one of the mansion's many corridors. The mansion, for all its grandeur, was a labyrinth of silence and mystery, and she often wandered its halls when she couldn't sleep. As she passed the library, she noticed the door was slightly ajar. Curiosity got the better of her, and she pushed it open. Inside, she found a few of the mansion's oldest and most trusted vampires gathered around a table, speaking in hushed tones. As she stepped further into the room, she caught a few words: rebellion, blood pact, and the throne. Her heart raced as she realized that what she had suspected was true. The war wasn't just about power, it was a battle for control of the vampire kingdom, and Vincent was at the center of it. The vampires at the table stopped speaking as soon as they saw her, their eyes narrowing in suspicion. But Eleanor didn't flinch. She had come too far to show weakness now. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice steady, though her mind was spinning. One of the older vampires, a woman with pale skin and sharp features, looked at her coldly. "This is not for you to hear," she said dismissively. But Eleanor refused to back down. "I'm part of this now," she said, her tone firm. "I deserve to know what's happening." Vincent's voice interrupted before anyone could respond. "Enough, Vespera," he said, stepping into the room with a calm but commanding presence. "Eleanor has the right to know." He walked toward her, his gaze meeting hers with a mixture of pride and something darker. The war is coming, Eleanor. But this is more than just a battle for power. It's about survival. There are factions within the vampire world, old rivalries, ancient blood feuds that go back centuries. Some of them believe my rise to power was unnatural, and they will stop at nothing to take what I've built. The rebellion isn't just a political uprising. It's a challenge to everything we've worked for. Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. She had known, on some level, that there was more to Vincent than he had let on, but hearing it laid out so plainly made it all the more real. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vincent's gaze softened as he placed a hand on her shoulder. "We fight, but you have to be ready, Eleanor. The path we're on is not an easy one. There will be sacrifices, and not everyone will make it to the end. But together, we will take control. Together, we will reshape the world." Eleanor took a deep breath, the weight of his words settling over her like a heavy cloak. She had already stepped into this world, already accepted the changes that had come with it. But now, the stakes were higher than ever. There was no turning back. As the days went by, Eleanor's training became more intense. Vincent kept pushing her, teaching her the ways of the vampire world, how to wield her power with precision and control. But there was always a sense of urgency, a constant reminder that the rebellion was drawing closer. Each night, Vincent would take her to the city, showing her the dark corners where vampires plotted and schemed, where power was traded like currency, and where alliances were made and broken in the blink of an eye. Eleanor learned quickly that in this world, trust was a luxury few could afford. As Vincent's most trusted ally, she was now at the center of the power struggle. But with that power came danger. Eleanor could feel the growing tension in the air, the fear that gripped the mansion's inhabitants. The rebellion was coming, and no one knew who would emerge victorious. The only certainty was that the world she had once known was gone. She had become a part of something much larger, and now there was no going back. And as the days drew closer to the inevitable clash, Eleanor found herself standing at the edge of a precipice. She had the power to shape her own destiny, but what would she choose when everything she had worked for, everything she had become, was at stake? The night was heavy with tension as Eleanor stood on the balcony of the mansion, overlooking the sprawling city below. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a pale light over the streets, but everything felt shrouded in darkness. She had learned that the rebellion was no longer a distant threat, it was imminent. The factions that sought to tear Vincent's power from him were gathering, their forces growing with each passing day. And Eleanor, as his closest ally, would be at the heart of this battle. She had come to terms with the power she now wielded, the strength that flowed through her veins like fire, but she was beginning to realize that power came with a price. She was no longer the woman who had walked into this world, seeking a way out of her old life. She was a player in a game much larger than herself, a game where loyalty was uncertain and betrayal could come from anywhere. Vincent had been preparing her for this, training her, showing her how to fight, how to control the vast power she had unlocked. But there were moments when Eleanor wondered if she was truly ready for what was coming. The rebellion wasn't just about power, it was about survival. And the truth was, Eleanor wasn't sure if she could survive this war. "You're thinking too much," Vincent's voice broke through her thoughts. She turned to see him standing behind her, his figure bathed in the soft light from the mansion. His amber eyes, as always, were intense, but there was something else in them now, something darker, more guarded. He walked over to her, his presence as commanding as ever. "You've come so far, Eleanor. You've embraced your true nature, and now, you must face what's coming. But I need you to focus. I need you to trust me." Eleanor's heart raced as she met his gaze. She had trusted him from the beginning, but now, with everything on the line, she felt a flicker of doubt. "What if I can't do this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Vincent reached out, taking her hand in his. His grip was firm, steady, as though he was trying to anchor her in the storm that was rapidly approaching. "You can, Eleanor. You have everything you need inside you. The power, the strength, the will to fight. But you must trust yourself, and you must trust me. Together, we will destroy those who seek to bring us down." Eleanor took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She could feel the weight of his words pressing down on her, but she couldn't deny the truth in them. She had chosen this path, and there was no turning back now. She had to fight, not just for herself, but for everything Vincent had promised her. The world she was stepping into was harsh, unforgiving, and filled with enemies lurking in the shadows. But she wasn't afraid anymore. "I trust you," she said finally, her voice firm. "I'm ready." Vincent's eyes softened, a hint of approval in his gaze. "Good. Tomorrow, we make our move." The next day, Eleanor found herself standing beside Vincent in a room filled with his most trusted allies. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, the tension almost palpable. As Vincent spoke, outlining their plans for the coming battle, Eleanor couldn't help but notice the calculating looks exchanged between the vampires. They were all here for one reason: to secure their place in the new world that Vincent would create. But Eleanor knew that not all of them had the same loyalty to Vincent. There were whispers, rumors that some of them were just waiting for the right moment to strike. And as much as Vincent seemed confident, Eleanor knew that this was more than just a battle for power. It was a battle for control of everything they had built, and it would be fought with blood. "You will be at the front lines of this, Eleanor," Vincent said, pulling her attention back to him. "Your power will be the key to winning this. We can't afford to lose." She nodded, though her heart was pounding. She had always been an observer, someone who watched from the sidelines. But now, she was no longer a bystander. She was part of this world, and she would fight for it. The days leading up to the confrontation were filled with strategy and preparation. Eleanor trained harder than ever, honing her skills and learning to harness her power with precision. But as the time grew closer, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She had seen the tension between Vincent and his allies, and it was starting to weigh on her. She had become part of this world, but now she wondered if she could ever truly trust it, or the people in it. As night fell, Vincent gathered his forces, and Eleanor stood by his side, ready to face whatever came next. She felt the weight of the world on her shoulders, but she knew there was no turning back. They were about to march into battle, and the outcome would change everything. The time for doubt was over. "We fight tonight," Vincent said, his voice a low growl. "We will show them that no one can take what we have. No one can tear us down." Eleanor nodded, her body trembling with adrenaline. She had fought for power, but now she would fight to protect it. This was her world now, and she would not let anyone take it from her. As they moved into the night, the sounds of the city seemed to fade away. The battle was about to begin, and there would be no turning back. The rebellion had come, and Eleanor was ready to face it head-on. She had become more than just a woman fighting for survival. She had become a force to be reckoned with, and tonight, she would prove it. The night was thick with tension as Eleanor stood at the edge of the battlefield, the ground beneath her feet vibrating with the distant roar of war. She could feel the power surging through her veins, the energy that Vincent had unlocked in her. But the weight of the moment was unlike anything she had ever experienced. The rebellion was no longer a distant threat. It was here, at their doorstep, and the time for preparation had ended. The vampires who had once been her allies now stood with her, ready for the fight ahead. But Eleanor knew that the real battle was not just against their enemies. It was against the darkness within themselves. She had seen the distrust, the doubt, the shifting alliances, and she realized that the true war was not just for power, it was for survival. Vincent had trained her well, but there was still a part of her that wasn't sure she was ready. But now, standing on the precipice of everything she had ever wanted, she couldn't afford to second-guess herself. The rebels, led by rival vampire houses, had gathered in force, their numbers overwhelming, their thirst for power undeniable. And the tension in the air was suffocating. The stakes were higher than ever, and Eleanor knew that the outcome of tonight's battle would change everything. The rebel leader, an ancient vampire with eyes as cold as the winter night, stepped forward from the shadows. His voice rang out, commanding and filled with contempt. "Vincent Blackwood," he sneered. "You think you can control this world? You, who have only lived for a few centuries. The old ways will never die. The vampire bloodlines that have existed for millennia will not bow to your rule." Vincent's gaze met the rebel leader's, unflinching, his voice calm as ever. "The old ways are dead," he replied, his words carrying the weight of centuries. "The world is changing, and those who refuse to change with it will be left behind. You can fight all you want, but it's over." A deep silence followed Vincent's words, the rebels glaring at him, but not daring to move. Eleanor stood at Vincent's side, her heart pounding in her chest. She had never been in the middle of a battle like this before, but she could feel the power coursing through her, the same power that Vincent had shown her how to harness. She was no longer the weak, desperate woman she had once been. She was part of something much larger, something that could reshape the future. With a sudden, deafening roar, the rebel forces surged forward, and the battle began. Eleanor felt the surge of energy within her, the ancient magic that Vincent had awakened, and she moved into action. Her movements were fluid, precise, as she summoned the power that had been lying dormant within her. She could feel the air crackling with electricity as she harnessed the energy, sending it into the battlefield, pushing back the rebels who dared to come too close. She fought with everything she had, her every instinct now attuned to the world of vampires and their dark powers. But the fight was not easy. The rebels were relentless, and their power seemed endless. The air was filled with the sound of clashing steel and the screams of those who fought, their blood soaking the earth beneath them. Vincent fought beside her, his strength unwavering as he tore through the rebel forces, but Eleanor could see the strain in his eyes. He had been preparing for this moment for centuries, but even he wasn't invincible. She knew that the true test of this battle was not just in their strength, but in their ability to trust one another, to fight as one. She could feel the energy building inside her, the power surging faster than she could control, and she knew that if she didn't master it soon, it could destroy her. She took a deep breath, focusing her mind, pushing the chaos aside. This was her fight now, and she had to finish it. With a cry, she released the energy she had been holding back, unleashing a wave of power that washed over the battlefield. The force of it was so great that it sent the rebels flying, their bodies crashing to the ground as the air around them hummed with the raw power Eleanor had called forth. The battlefield fell silent as the last of the rebels were defeated. Eleanor stood there, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her body trembling from the sheer exertion of what she had just done. Vincent stood beside her, his eyes meeting hers, filled with pride and something else, something deeper. "You did it," he said, his voice quiet but filled with awe. "You've proven yourself." Eleanor's heart raced as she looked around the battlefield. The air was thick with smoke and the scent of blood, but she felt a sense of triumph wash over her. She had done it. She had fought, and she had won. But as the reality of the battle sank in, Eleanor knew that the fight was far from over. The rebellion had been defeated, but the war for control of the vampire world was just beginning. She had become part of something larger than herself, and now, more than ever, she understood the cost of that power. Vincent had shown her the way, but the future was still uncertain. She had won this battle, but would she be able to hold on to the power she had gained? Would she be able to trust Vincent and the others who had fought by her side? As she stood there, looking at the battlefield and the world she had helped shape, Eleanor realized that the journey ahead was just as uncertain as the one that had brought her here. But for the first time in her life, she felt ready to face whatever came next. The aftermath of the battle left the mansion in a strange silence. Eleanor stood at the center of the grand hall, the echoes of the fight still fresh in her mind. The smell of blood and smoke clung to the air, but there was something more, something heavier, that weighed on her. The victory, though decisive, felt bittersweet. They had won the battle, but Eleanor knew this was only the beginning. The rebellion had been crushed, but Vincent's enemies were not gone. They would regroup, they would plan, and they would strike again. And yet, in this moment, Eleanor could feel a shift inside herself. She was no longer the woman who had walked into this world so many months ago. She had embraced her power, and now it was hers to command. Her senses were sharper than ever before, and her connection to the vampire world had deepened. She was no longer an outsider. She was part of this world, its future, its destiny. But even as she felt the surge of power within her, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Vincent had kept her close, but there was always a wall between them, a distance that she couldn't bridge. The more she learned, the more she realized that he was hiding something from her, something important. She had been loyal, but loyalty could only go so far when trust was in question. As she walked through the halls of the mansion, her thoughts swirling with questions, She found herself drawn to Vincent's private study. The door was slightly ajar, and she could hear his voice inside, low and intense. She paused for a moment, unsure if she should enter. But curiosity got the better of her, and she pushed the door open just enough to see him. Vincent stood at a large oak desk, his back to her, speaking to someone on the phone. His words were calm, but Eleanor could hear the undertone of urgency in his voice. "No, we're not going to make any moves yet," Vincent said. "I don't want them knowing we're aware. The timing has to be perfect. Let them think they still have the upper hand." Eleanor froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Who was he speaking to? And what was this about? She stepped closer, trying to hear more, but Vincent turned abruptly, his sharp gaze locking onto hers. "Eleanor," he said, his voice smooth but edged with something cold. "I didn't expect you to be here." She tried to mask her surprise, but she knew he could see through her. She had never been able to hide anything from him, not really. "Who were you talking to?" she asked, her voice steady but with an edge of suspicion. Vincent placed the phone down, his gaze never leaving hers. "It's nothing for you to worry about," he said, his voice smooth but clipped. "Business matters." Eleanor didn't buy it. She could feel the tension between them, the unspoken words that hung in the air. "I don't like secrets, Vincent," she said, her tone firm. "I've given you my loyalty. I've trusted you. But if you're hiding something from me—" Vincent's expression darkened slightly. "You're in this now, Eleanor," he said, his voice low, almost threatening. "You've made your choice. You knew what you were getting into when you walked through that door." He stepped closer to her, and for a moment, Eleanor felt the weight of his presence. "But make no mistake, Eleanor. There's more at stake here than just us. There's a war brewing, and you're a part of it whether you like it or not." Eleanor stood her ground, but a part of her wondered if she had made a mistake. Had she really understood what she had chosen? Was this power worth the cost? She had gained so much, but she was starting to wonder if the price was too high. "What aren't you telling me, Vincent?" she asked again, her voice quieter this time. Vincent's gaze softened, but there was a coldness in his eyes that she hadn't seen before. "You'll learn in time, Eleanor," he said. "There are things in this world, things we don't control. Even I can't change everything." Eleanor wanted to push further, to demand the truth, but she knew Vincent wasn't going to tell her anything. He never did. Instead, she forced herself to look away, to break the tension between them. She had trusted him before, and despite the unease gnawing at her, she had to continue trusting him. "For now, fine," she said, her voice steady. "But don't think for a second that I'll turn a blind eye to this. If you want my loyalty, you'll have to give me the truth." Vincent's lips curled into a small smile, but there was no warmth in it. "You're learning, Eleanor. That's good." He turned away from her, his back once again to the desk. "Now, there's work to be done. We have to make sure this victory counts." Eleanor stood there for a moment longer, watching him. She had crossed a line when she entered this world, and now there was no going back. But she couldn't ignore the feeling that something wasn't right. There were secrets, dangers lurking beneath the surface, and she didn't know if she could trust anyone anymore, not even Vincent. As she left the study, she felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on her. The war was coming, but so was the truth. And Eleanor knew that one way or another, she was going to have to face it. The days following her confrontation with Vincent weighed heavily on Eleanor's mind. She had felt the coldness in his words, the way he had distanced himself from her, as if warning her of the dangers ahead. There were still secrets, too many unanswered questions, and with every passing moment, Eleanor's suspicions grew. Vincent had always been the enigmatic figure, the one she had trusted, but now she couldn't help but feel that trust slipping away. The mansion, once a symbol of her newfound power, now felt like a gilded cage. The walls, adorned with ancient portraits and eerie relics, seemed to watch her, every corner filled with whispers she couldn't quite catch. Vincent was often absent, speaking of matters that Eleanor was not yet ready to know. The rebellion had been a test, but this was something different, something far more dangerous. One night, as she walked the halls of the mansion, Eleanor heard voices echoing in the distance. They weren't the usual murmurs of servants or the faint rustle of papers from Vincent's study. No, these voices were more urgent, more strained. She followed the sound, her footsteps light against the marble floor, until she reached the grand library. The door was cracked open, and she could hear Vincent's voice, raised in frustration. "We need to act now," he was saying. "The time for subtlety is over. If we wait any longer, the throne will slip from our hands." Eleanor hesitated outside the door, torn between curiosity and caution. She had learned to trust Vincent, but now it seemed like everything was shifting, unraveling before her eyes. "We can't move too quickly, Vincent," came a second voice, one that Eleanor didn't immediately recognize. "If we push too hard, we risk losing everything." Eleanor's pulse quickened as she recognized the voice. Lucian. He was one of Vincent's most trusted allies, but Eleanor had always sensed an underlying tension between them. They were not friends, but they had fought side by side in the rebellion. Yet, there was something in his tone now that unsettled her. "I understand your concerns, Lucian," Vincent replied, his voice calm but filled with a subtle edge of impatience. "But I've made my decision. The rebellion has shown us their hand. We can't afford to wait any longer. The time has come to strike, to take what is rightfully ours." Eleanor's heart raced as she realized the true nature of what Vincent was planning. She had heard whispers of a power struggle, of factions that would stop at nothing to seize control, but now she was learning that Vincent himself might be at the center of it all. It wasn't just about power, it was about domination, about crushing those who dared to oppose him. But Vincent, Lucian's voice was quieter now, more measured. "If we go to war with them now, we risk alienating the very allies we've worked so hard to cultivate. There are others who will turn against us." Vincent's response was sharp, decisive. "If they turn, then they were never truly allies to begin with. We don't need them." The silence that followed was heavy, and Eleanor felt a shiver run down her spine. This wasn't just a political move. This was a declaration of war. It was a fight for the throne, for the future of their world. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. Eleanor stood frozen in place, her mind racing. Vincent's ambition was boundless, and she had underestimated just how far he was willing to go to claim what he believed was rightfully his. But there was more. She had seen the darkness in his eyes, the ruthlessness that drove him. She had trusted him, but now she was beginning to question whether she had been a pawn in his game all along. With a deep breath, Eleanor stepped back from the door, her heart pounding. She needed time to think, to process everything she had just overheard. Vincent had always been her mentor, her protector, but now she was beginning to wonder if he had ever truly seen her as an equal. Had he simply been grooming her for his own purposes? Or was there something deeper, something more complicated between them? The air in the mansion seemed to grow colder as Eleanor retreated to her private chambers. She sat by the window, her thoughts swirling in a storm of uncertainty. She had fought beside Vincent, had helped him achieve the power he now held, but she could no longer ignore the feeling that she was being used, manipulated. What had she become? In this world? Was she just another tool in Vincent's quest for control, or had she truly earned her place beside him? The night stretched on, and Eleanor found herself torn between the loyalty she had once felt for Vincent and the growing realization that she might be standing on the edge of something far darker than she had ever imagined. The world they inhabited was one of secrets, of power plays and hidden agendas, and Eleanor was beginning to see the true cost of that power. She had made her choice to fight for Vincent, but now she was questioning whether that choice had been made for her. As the hours passed, and the city outside the mansion lay in stillness, Eleanor knew that the next move would be hers. She could no longer be a passive player in this game. If she wanted to survive, to shape her own destiny, she would have to take control of her future, whether Vincent allowed it or not. The days following Eleanor's confrontation with Vincent were filled with uncertainty and unease. She had overheard his plans for war, the ruthless ambition that had always been there, hidden behind the charm and power. She could no longer ignore the fact that Vincent's vision for the future wasn't just about survival. It was about domination, about bending the world to his will. But as the realization settled in, Eleanor also understood something else. She had power too, power that she had only begun to tap into. She had fought in the battle, stood at Vincent's side, and now, it was time to decide what role she would play in this war. Would she be a pawn in his game, or would she seize control of her own destiny? The mansion, once a symbol of her place in this world, now felt like a prison. The walls that had once seemed welcoming now felt suffocating, closing in on her. Vincent was busy preparing for the next phase of his plan, but Eleanor was no longer willing to stand by quietly. The more she thought about his words, the more she realized that his vision wasn't her own. She didn't want to be a part of a world built on manipulation and control. She wanted something different, something she could call her own. And so, as the tension in the mansion grew and Vincent's plans for war reached their peak, Eleanor made a decision. She couldn't follow him anymore. She couldn't be part of a war that would destroy everything in its path. She would leave. But leaving wasn't going to be easy. The mansion was Vincent's domain, and escaping it would be like walking into the unknown. She didn't know what awaited her outside, but she knew that she couldn't stay, not if she wanted to preserve who she was becoming. That night, Eleanor stood by the balcony once more, looking out at the city below. The moon hung low in the sky, casting its cold light over the world, and for the first time in a long while, Eleanor felt a sense of clarity. She was no longer just Vincent's ally, no longer just a part of his world. She was her own person, and it was time to take control of her own fate. As she turned to leave, a familiar voice stopped her in her tracks. "You can't leave," Vincent said, his voice as smooth as ever, but with a coldness that made her heart race. Eleanor turned to face him, her heart pounding in her chest. "I can't follow you anymore, Vincent," she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her insides. "I can't be part of this war. I can't be part of a world that only seeks to destroy." Vincent stepped closer, his gaze intense. "You can't run away from this, Eleanor," he said, his voice low and filled with a dangerous edge. "You've already made your choice. You've chosen to be part of this world. You can't just walk away." Eleanor stood her ground, her resolve firm. "I'm not walking away, Vincent. I'm choosing something else. Something different. I'm choosing my own path." For a moment, Vincent was silent, his eyes narrowing as he studied her. Then, with a soft laugh, he spoke. "You think you can leave? You think you can walk away from everything I've given you?" Eleanor met his gaze, her heart racing, but her voice unwavering. "I don't need your power, Vincent. I don't need your control. I've learned what I need to learn, and now I'm ready to move forward on my own." Vincent's expression darkened, and Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice cold and filled with threat. "No one walks away. From me, Eleanor. Not without consequences." Eleanor took a step back, her heart racing, but her determination solid. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," she said, her voice steady. "I'm not afraid of what you'll do." With that, she turned and walked away, her heart pounding in her chest, but with a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in a long time. She was leaving the world Vincent had created, the world that had once seemed like everything she wanted. But now, she realized it was nothing more than a cage. As she walked out into the night, Eleanor felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She was free, but she also knew that freedom came with its own set of challenges. The world she had stepped into was not kind, and the enemies she had made by leaving Vincent would not be easily forgotten. But Eleanor was ready. She had faced darkness before, and now she would face it again, on her terms. She would rebuild, make her own way in the world, and never again let anyone dictate her future. The moonlight shone down on her as she walked into the unknown, and for the first time, she felt a sense of hope. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, and she would fight to protect that life, whatever it took. Vampire stories have long captivated audiences with their blend of dark romance, supernatural intrigue, and thrilling power struggles. In this latest tale, the protagonist Eleanor is thrust into a world of vampires, where she must navigate the complexities of power, trust, and loyalty. From the moment Eleanor encounters Vincent, a mysterious and powerful vampire, she is swept into a whirlwind of danger, secrets, and the allure of immortality. As she learns the ways of the vampire world, Eleanor must come to terms with her newfound abilities and the price that comes with them. But in this world, where alliances are fragile and betrayal is never far behind, Eleanor must decide whether to continue following Vincent or carve her own path. With the stakes higher than ever, her journey mirrors the classic themes of vampire stories, where nothing is as it seems, and the line between good and evil is always blurred. As the rebellion against Vincent's rule intensifies, Eleanor must decide whether she will stand by his side or challenge the very forces that have shaped her life. In the end, This tale of vampire stories comes full circle, with Eleanor taking control of her own destiny and leaving the shadows behind. This story explores the darker sides of vampire stories, from manipulation to the ultimate quest for power, as Eleanor fights not only for survival, but for the right to choose her own future.